Da det en glede å ønske alle dere som har registrert dere som Israel-venner med på dette nettmøtet med Mossab Hassan Youssef, eller også kalt Sønn av Hamas, eller den grønne prinsen. Han har vært med oss tidligere på både Oslo Symposium og vår sommerkonferanse. Og mange av dere kjenner sikkert hans historie, hvordan han vokste opp som sønn av en av grunnleggerne til Hamas, men vendte dette regimet, denne organisasjonen og dette hatet ryggen, og ble i stedet en venn av Israel. Og hvis det skulle være sånn at du har spørsmål som du ønsker å stille han, så kan du stille det i chat-funksjonen på siden du inne på nå. Vi går dermed rett til sak, hvor vi tar jo intervjuet på engelsk. Kanskje vi forsøker å oppsummere litt innimellom, men som sagt, har du spørsmål, og det vi har kapasitet, så formidler vi spørsmålene til han. Dear Mossab Hassan Youssef, so much welcome to this broadcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's a great joy, thank you. I just want to ask you, Mossab, here in the West, there is a lot of accusations of about the Israeli society, that they are a racist, apartheid society. What is your view and your response to these accusations?
You know, in our culture, we say, you know, when you point with one finger at someone, you like basically pointing three fingers towards yourself. You know, why someone would want to go on and accuse the whole nation of being racist, you know, or even like a government, you know, it's nonsense and absurd accusations that actually unfit for the 21st century. But look, the accusations of the Jewish people, unfortunately, they are not new. Anti-Semitism is not a new thing. And people want somebody to blame, you know, so why not blame the Jewish people, which appear, you know, to be like persecuting the Palestinian people, which only can exist in black and white reality. The Middle East reality is not black and white, and it's not, in fact, right and wrong. It's about a country, a democracy, defends itself against ideological, fundamental terrorist groups that target all type of life, innocent civilians. So I don't know those people who accuse, you know, if they were in the position of Israel, how would they deal with such a problem?
What's your view on you have been inside the Israeli society. What's your view of the values of the Jewish country?
You know, first of all, just off my mind in the moment, the third biggest political party in Israel is the Arab Party. And that's in the parliament. It's legitimate. They have their rights. They argue, they yell, they vote, and they have the chance to participate in the government if they want, but they refuse to participate. You know, they're a big party. So what apartheid we're talking about then? So the fact, I don't want to say other things regarding to Israel and the Arab world. The Jewish people, you know, pray for peace of the world, you know, they're not out there to conquer the world, you know, and they are actually, they know how to coexist with every society. You know, if you go throughout the Jewish communities around the world, yes, they live in their own neighborhoods and they have the right to have their own communities, but they respect the local laws. They don't interfere, you know, with nothing. And beautiful people. You know, they have contributed so much to life, you know, like, for example, when they have innovation in a certain field, they don't say, you know, this is only for the Jewish people because Jewish people made it, you know, it just, they share with the rest of the world. You know, this is the spirit. I wish, you know, that the Palestinian people have some solid account or even the Arabians have a solid account to actually brag about, but they don't. So it's absurd accusation. I think this small nation, and of course, for me, for the audience from outside, they say, okay, they paid you, this is why you're saying this. But there is like, for me, there is a connection, and fascination of such a small nation, and the amount of contribution to life, to the entire human family, and the amount of persecution that they had to face from all type of people throughout the centuries, exile, exodus, Holocaust, genocide. It's just insane, when you think about the stupidity that led to the Holocaust, for example. It started with propaganda like this, people who are basically ignorant, uneducated, and they just go on accusing a small group of people, well, if they are wealthy, maybe they are working hard, maybe they know how to be wealthy, and our jealousy should not be a reason, to just go after them and accuse them of things that they are not. Some of the most amazing and wonderful people that I never thought I would meet were, among them were like Jewish people, and very inspiring. And their spirit is towards life. It's pro-life. War is ugly, and Israel, when they defend themselves, they are firm. They cannot compromise because they saw the worst, from the days of Babylon, from the days of Egypt and the Pharaoh, and go on like throughout the century, what other people did to them. So of course they need to be armed. They have a solid reason why to be armed and why to defend themselves. But are they like going out and killing people because of their nationality or because of their ethnicity? Well, Israel has the capacity to wipe the Arab world off the map. They have that kind of capacity, but they are very responsible how they actually respond violence. If the picture was the opposite, if the Arabs had the power that Israel have, they would not hesitate to wipe Israel off the map just because they are Jewish. So this is the paradox. It's complicated, and those who want to project their hatred on Israel, I don't know how to stop them. But the truth is beyond me and beyond them.
Our nation, the state of Norway, has been involved for decades, actually, in the Oslo process. And we have used a lot of money into this process. But still there is really no peace agreement and peace coexistence with Hamas and parts of the leadership with Fatah and Islamic Jihad and so on. What is the challenges from your point of view with the Palestinian society and maybe the leadership of it?
Well, it's not, there's no such a thing as the biggest challenge. The entire thing is a challenge. And the birth of Israel was a miracle. And there was a chance for a birth of an Arab country that lives side by Israel at that time. Because that land, the land of Israel today, it used to be under the occupation of so many forces, Turks, Ottoman, Crusades, Muslims, Arabians, Egyptians, Babylonians or Persians, so many forces came and occupied for a period of time. And this is why, we had in the Jewish history, the exile or the exodus, it's like at least 2 times from Babylon and from Egypt to Egypt and to Babylon. So it's a area where basically there was nothing there. And Sykes-Picot came, then, the British mandate for the land. And from that point, Arabs had the opportunity to actually, for the first time, to have a legitimate state recognized by United Nations, by the entire world, that lives in peace together with a Jewish state. That, you know, the world felt the need, you know, that the Jewish people had suffered so much that it's time for them to come back from diaspora and just be in their own land where they are connected ideologically and they're connected in spirit. So, and that was legitimate, but the Arab people saw that as like invasion, as some like, you know, Israel is a superpower and they came and just took this piece of land, you know, regardless of all the historic evidence, you know, that those people are connected to that land, and they bought the land. It's not like, you know, they came with guns and they start taking over. You know, they came, they paid money for the land and they built kibbutzim and all that with their eyes towards like a modern country, and they succeeded. You know, this is where, you know, the problem began. That Israel focused on building an Israeli or a Jewish state. You know, some people don't even like to call it a Jewish state because it's not only a Jewish state. But the Palestinians focused on trying to destroy Israel rather than building a Palestinian state. And this is where, you know, the gap just kept widening and widening and widening. And look at the situation. 70 years later, they kept rejecting every proposal and every project. And every time they reject something, they get less. And they keep getting less and less and less. And this just stubborn Palestinian leadership, you know, those are the actual criminals, you know, and those are the ones to be, in fact, held accountable because their goal has not been building a Palestinian state. Their goal has been to take the money from Norway, you know, from Europe, from the United States, from the Palestinian people, and give nothing in return. This is their game. They're just a bunch of political criminals, you know, who profit out of conflict and exist only when there is conflict. And their fear, if the conflict is over, there is no need for them anymore, you know? So this is the psychic of those people, which basically I know on both sides, you know. I'm familiar with what's so-called the Palestinian leadership, not only Hamas, also Fatah, you know, and the rest of the Palestinian factions. Greedy people. So if I really want to blame somebody, I don't like blaming, but if I want to blame someone, why do I want to blame Israel that was okay with part of the land? And they were so happy and grateful to the world that finally recognized a small piece of the land to just let them live in peace, okay? And have the capacity to protect themselves if they have to. The Palestinian people did not see it that way, you know? And today, it's already 70 years, and they are repeating the same exact mistakes. Maybe you will ask me later, or maybe it's on your head, you know, regarding to what's happening right now in the Middle East. We can talk about it in more detail, but this is another example that we have an opportunity on the table. And what the Palestinian Authority is saying, we don't want the deal of the century. It's unfair. We don't want it, and they're rejecting it. Just another rejection, you know. This is their style.
Yeah, we're going to speak more together with regarding the peace agreements with the Gulf states and Israel. But I just want to ask you about the situation today. What is the role of Iran and Turkey? Is this ongoing process?
You know, Turkey. When we talk about Erdogan, he is the politician who has the Sultan's ambition, you know. In his head, he is not a president. In his head, he's a Sultan. And maybe he wants to be another Sultan, you know, who controlled all the Arab region, you know. This is what the Ottoman Empire did, you know, prior to the World War I. and he's posing as that, as a, this is his ideology. It's very close to the Muslim Brotherhood ideology. It's anti-Israel, it's anti-Jewish, it's anti-Western civilization and Western values. So he will try, he will try, and his party will try. And most importantly, this is not just an individual with ambitions. It's a political party that is Islamists, basically, and it's an Islamic movement, and they long for their empire, and it's a very big and dangerous political ambition. But throughout the centuries, all countries, went through this stuff. But today it's 21st century, I mean, like, really, there is no room for like empires and emperors right now. Even political borders, it's like becoming a problem. So those people live in the 7th century mentality, basically, or like in the Dark Ages, and their dream is unrealistic. Now Iran is even worse, but it's the same. It's their ambition to control human and natural resources in the region, and they will continue to create chaos in the region and division. Iran and the Arab world are bitter enemies, because simply it's ideological problem of what's so-called Sunni Shia, and Iran represent the Shia minority. And they have a fundamental problem, who's a real Muslim and who's not a real Muslim, and the Shias say, we are the only legitimate part, So, well, this is a big problem, in the belief that it's not only about the government; it's about the denomination of Shias. Okay, so these are the things that we pay our, like, where I focus. Of course, we can say many other things, artificial, political, but the ideological connection. Why Turkey is behaving that way. Turkey is the Ottoman Empire. And some people have a dream to bring it back to life, and Iran is the same thing. They believe that they need to go invade all the Sunni Arab countries, 21 countries, and convert them all to Shiites, and therefore dominate the world. Very dangerous people.
Yeah. If Biden will now be the new president in January in the States of America, United States of America, what do you think if they will try to get a new agreement with a nuclear agreement with Iran? What do you think about it?
Iran does not believe in democracy. Iran does not accept the other. And I'm not against tolerance and negotiations and all that. The use of force should be a final resort. But intelligence services, including CIA and Mossad, and other intelligence services, they know that Iran is not giving up their nuclear ambitions. And with this type of leadership, you don't know how they're going to use this type of power. We're not talking about accountable. Okay, United States is a nuclear power. Israel is a nuclear power. France, and many other countries. But it's not up to a religious leader, sitting somewhere in the dark, and if he's upset, he's going to press the button and wipe out a country, So this is the reality of Iran. And of course, there are other calculations, when it comes to natural resources and to control the region, and political interests between European countries and Iran. And this is where, I think some European countries will go on compromising, or maybe a left party in the United States might think, it's like, no, those guys, we can talk to them. What language? They don't understand your language. In fact, they see tolerance as a sign of weakness. So this is a fundamental problem. Now, with that said, I personally think sanctions are working, and this is the language that basically can make Iranians think 10 times before they act. Unfortunately, we saw the assassination of the Iranian scientist, and this is horrible. It's like the last resort. To have to stop the program instead of like just giving up the program and focusing on their infrastructure, focusing on their people. They're just giving up the future of the nation for a crazy idea of a nuclear program. So this guy had to get out of the way, and it's sad. At the end of the day, it's a human being, and there's killing involved, and there is like violence, the use of force. It's the last resort. So now with all this, I felt the need, to bring just like this small picture of the bigger truth. I hope from whatever next president is going to be in the United States, not to be naive about this. This is not about left and right wing. It's a very dangerous situation. Iran plus nuclear program is not good news. It doesn't matter, Republicans or Democrats. It really doesn't matter. And I think France, Germany, other European countries, they really need to maybe let go of their bargaining chips, whatever they're getting in return, because, Paris is very close, to the Iran, and it's within the range of any ballistic missile. So can you imagine, when Iran has the power, negotiations will be completely different. Okay, and many democratic countries and free countries in Europe will have to pay the price for centuries, So with that said, I just hope that we keep in our minds that we are not dealing with a democratic country, accountable, responsible, and they lie. Very important that they lie, and it's justified by their religion. To say it's like, okay, this is a peaceful, it's about energy, but in secret, we know that they are developing a bomb.
Speaking about international politics, United Nations does have a lot of big focus on what's going on in Israel in different ways. How is what is your view, what is your perspective on how the United Nations is handling Israel and this situation?
The United Nations is a changing phenomena. Look how many different resolutions regarding many problems. First of all, we need to think about it in terms of creating the problem. Who creates the problem? To begin with, those countries create the problem, especially the superpowers. Then they come sit down to try to solve them. And each force will take like a piece of the pie. This is what it is. Of course, we can say the United Nations and all nations, but not all nations are equal in this body. And there is change in politics in it. And there is a veto, and there are like all type of strange things going on. But, when we talk about Arab countries, Muslim countries, when they are, let's say, about 70 different countries, Muslim and Arab countries. And all of them don't want Israel to exist. They want it to simply cease to exist. This is their announced agendas, that they're anti-Israel. So they have influence. They have influence. And they can create all this type of political turbulence in the United Nations body. But the good news, things are changing right now. Things are changing. And hopefully when the oil money countries coming to realize that Israel, is not their enemy, then maybe they will take a step back from their push against the Jewish state or against Israel or the Jewish people, whatever you want to call it. And I hope that this is changing to the better. At the end of the day, I'm not an expert on the United Nations, and I don't have great hopes from them.
We are seeing a new day in the Middle East with the peace agreements between Israel and the United Arab Emirates and the Bahrain. How will this affect the relations between the states in the Middle East?
This is a new era. This is a beautiful manifestation of a dream I had many, many years ago. And I'm really happy to see it, at least in principle. Once powerful Arab regimes funding terrorists and funding extremists to go fight Israel, that they're coming right now and say, actually, we're not seen in Israel as an enemy anymore. In fact, Israel can be a great partner. And they had been waiting for the Palestinian Authority to come to a resolution, but they're asking for the impossible, things that cannot actually work. For example, 9 million people to go back to Israel, as they weren't born there even to begin with, and those Arab countries got fed up with it. They look at Israel, and it's a leading power in the region, leading economy, and they see in it as a gate to the world, to the universe. Everywhere you go right now, the Israeli technology, especially when it comes to defense, even the United States buy from them. China buys from them, India buys from them. All type of anti-terrorism technology and defense systems. And the Arabs look just at Iran. Their immediate threat just next door, and they are common enemy with what's supposed to be their worst enemy. But so it's it's just common sense. And the Arab world right now, they just got fed up of Palestine, enough of this. So they went just directly to Israel, and I think this is actually what will eventually bring the Palestinians to the table and have them to be just come down their horse and realize that it has been 70 years and there is no room right now for unrealistic dreams. It's about practical solutions. The Palestinians have a great opportunity like nowhere else, of something. And that was a proposal that I gave a couple of weeks ago, that a Vatican state. The Vatican is one of the most powerful states in the world and one of the richest countries in the world, but does not have political borders. It's a state within a state. And the Palestinian people have the opportunity to control the Muslim holy sites, the Christian holy sites, and take tickets and take lots of money on the way in, on the way out, you know, and they will be very rich, very happy. You know, they don't have to live off other superpowers donation. And they need to forget about borders, for example. And who cares about borders? You know, and if they drop their guns, if they get disarmed, like Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and, you know, they don't need the armies. They just need the police force, you know, and then a bridge to the world can be opened. And this Arab countries can bring industries and markets and open it up, you know, in a way that nobody could imagine. You know, instead of giving the Palestinian Authority billions of dollars to spend it on cosmetics for their wives, you know, this is how they spend the money, you know. Rather than that, you know, they can build industrial zones and let Israelis and Palestinians work together in a solar system, in like whatever it is, you know, and innovate, renovate, get like integrate the entire area. You know, finally, Ishmael and Isaac reunited, come to work together. It's very possible, you know. And throughout my journey, you know, I'm somehow Ishmael, whether they like it or not, you know, and it was a choice for me to just like destroy all the walls and all the barriers and just come to Isaac and extend my hand and say, brother, you know, enough of this. And Isaac extend his hand back, you know, and we think together and we share together. It's just one family. Okay, this might sound like a bit emotional right now, you know, but this is what it is. You know, and eventually all these political and ideological barriers created by Iran, by Turkey, by the Ottoman empires, it's just like forms of ignorance. This is what it is. And eventually, you know, Palestinian people don't need like right now to go and try to fit like another elephant in the room, you know, or another elephant in the eye of the needle. It's think about the Vatican. You know, think about a state without borders, you know, and trust me, Israel does not want to rule over the Palestinian people. It's not of its interest at all, you know. So with that said, take the money, build infrastructure, you know. You have the holy sites, not many countries, you know, Al-Aqsa Mosque, for example, at Temple Mount. And I'm sorry for the long answer, but this is like significant because, you know, this is like how ideas, you know, can actually eventually manifest. Is the third important Islamic holy site. And the Muslim world has been banned from visiting their holy site for about 70 years or almost 100 years. Muslim pilgrims cannot go visit their own mosque. Why? Because the Palestinians are hard-headed, stubborn, and say, no, nobody come to Al-Aqsa Mosque before we solve the Palestinian situation. And millions of Muslims long to go visit their mosque and pray. So isn't that a crime against their own religion, against their own people? Then who said that it's a crime to build a Jewish temple just next to the Muslim mosque? There is like enough on Temple Mount. If it was up to me, I would build it. If I had the money, I will build it myself, you know, and let Isaac and Ishmael worship all together, you know, so one family. What's wrong with that? You know, this is what I would like to see. And by the way, if the Palestinian Authority miss on this opportunity, my suggestion to give the Islamic holy site in Jerusalem to Saudi Arabia, for example. Saudi Arabia right now sitting down with Israel. They've been friends for a while. In fact, I maybe told you in person this about like 2 or 3 years ago. If you remember, I told you the defense system that brought the ballistic missiles from Yemen launched at Riyadh, where is Israeli defense system. If you remember, we had a conversation in the car, and this is not announced, you know. So there is mutual interest in defense, in technology, and there is beyond that, you know. And in my opinion, if the Palestinians insist on just like keeping the borders and the barriers between Israel and the rest of the Muslim world, then they need to sit on the bench and let the big players play. Saudi Arabia is a big player. The Arab Emirates is a big player, and right now they are playing. And this is why the Palestinian Authority is panicking, in a state of panic. What can they do? You know? And now for the Europeans, actually, you know, they need to understand this new reality. And for the Palestinian Authority, they need, if they reject another initiative, the deal of the century, for example, which is an amazing deal that can build a country for the Palestinians, then Saudi Arabia should take over the religious sites, open it for the Muslim world, and let the Muslim world actually come and see Israel for what it is, away from the propaganda, you know, by all the dark forces of existence. Let them come and see how actually Israel has Arabs, has Muslims, and in fact, Arabic is the official language in Israel. Islam is practiced freely, azan. There is no apartheid, you know, and in fact, Arab Israelis, if they choose, they can be just as equal as to the right-wing Jewish parties, you know, no problem. But they need to respect the country that they belong to. Again, my apology for the long answer. This is a new era. That's it. You know, when the super powerful countries, the oil money countries, come and say, that's it. You know, we are the ones now we want to play. And Israel is a partner. It's not an enemy. You know, and they actually see in Israel for what it is. Lots of things has changed.
Yeah. Musab, what do you think is the main driving force for the Arabic states to make peace with Israel?
Economy, defense, and many things in common, you know, and whether if it's friends in common and the enemies in common, you know, after the birth of ISIS, you know, look how ugly ISIS was, and that's just projection of darkness that all of us witnessed, you know, beheading people, burning people alive, and raping and destruction. Not to mention stealing and all the other acts of ISIS that all of us were disgusted of. But there was a positive to that situation, that it showed the Arab world, you've been dreaming and you've been singing about Islamic State for how long? And here you are. You see the Islamic State. Here it is right in front of your face. Is this what you want? And the answer has been no by the majority of the Muslim and the Arab world. The Arab world is tired of seeing masked men waving with their rifles, want to destroy civilization. Enough of this. And those who are waving with the rifles, they're not only against Israel, they're not only anti-Western civilization, they're also anti-life. And this is evident. So today, the Arab world see, you know, that this is a monster and two-edged sword. They paid the Muslim Brotherhood and they invested their energy in Hamas and in Islamic Jihad and giving donations and opening offices for Hamas in Riyadh and in Jeddah and in Abu Dhabi. For how long? For about 70 years. What was the outcome? It just created monsters, you know, that basically came with a fire back at the Arab world. So I think this is right now is coming to an end. And let me tell you something, and to your beautiful audience, that the Islamists and jihadists in the Middle East are cornered. They are bankrupted morally and financially. Okay. Morally and financially. When Saudi Arabia used to give them lots of money, it was a big problem. But right now there is no money and all the resources been drained out. And Iran, you know, this is like the benefit of the sanctions against Iran. Iran gives Hezbollah $1 billion annually and gives Hamas about $100 million. Okay, this is not big money, but this money can do lots of chaos. Lots of chaos. $100 million in the hands of a terrorist organization or $1 billion, that's a lot. So those like sanctions, maybe right now make Iran will also think, if the situation continue like this for the next few years. So practically, terrorist organizations are bankrupted. People are not buying their ideology. It's not making sense anymore. Of course, some people still buy it, but the majority don't want that. They don't like it. Out of money, out of business. They're pushed to the corner, and it happened that there is alternative happening simultaneously, that, hey, it's becoming normal, for Arab officials to shake hands with Israel, to visit with Israel, to sing together, and little by little, people are going to realize, like me, I realized many years ago, and it was impossible, to just people like us, it's one family. So this is what's happening right now. That's another dimension of the change.
Thank you, Musab. My last question. There's a lot of friends of Israel here in Norway, and we do also love the Arabs. We want the welfare of the Arabs, the peace for all people living in the region. How can we, in our society, be a blessing to the people living in the Middle East?
Investing, like the people of Norway, for example, the Oslo Accords, and we all know, that people from Scandinavia and the rest of the world, they want to see a resolution, to the situation, because the children are suffering, and generation after generation. It's just endless cycle, and there is no sane person in the world who does not want that all human beings live in peace. But the question is, do Arabs, make the choice also, the wise choices, that build bridge with all those people? Because you can sit in Oslo and hope, like, how can I help you? But like, if you're not helping yourself, I cannot help you, So practically, it's good that we have the intention and the level of responsibility towards this region. And eventually there will be opportunities, hopefully within the next couple of years, we will start seeing industrial zones built, in there. So this is maybe where, instead of Norway sending like 100 million euros or like more or less, whatever it is, say, I would like to see a project where, Palestinian youngsters working together with Israeli youngsters in the Jordanian Valley, for example, industrial zone. And let this multiply, let this be like more and more and more. And they would be like the Norwegian or the Norwegian project, the Swedish project, the French project, the whatever it is, where, people would build their economy, build infrastructure. There would be partnership, there would be love stories, there would be just, this is how we can, build it. So you have the resources, you have the financial resources, you have technologies, you're one of the most advanced countries, and you've got many amazing systems, how to handle life and government and the population. So I'm sure there will be room, but first we need to get those thugs, the middleman, out of the picture. So we are able to invest directly in the people, and I'm telling you that they hit rock bottom, this middleman, and the middleman is about to come to compromise right now, So there is going to be opportunity, and thank you so much for your support. For my people, the Palestinian people, my family, unfortunately, they don't talk to me, but they think that I'm against them, that, I took the side of my enemy against them. No, I choose to go and not make an enemy with Israel. That's totally different story. It doesn't mean that if I choose Israel, not my enemy, that I make my people my enemy. It's the same thing, that how much, I love my people, and I want to see them integrate and see the world and enjoy and live. It's one of the biggest dreams. It brings me to tears, when I see like one who was able to make it out. out of that mentality. But it's not enough for me to be emotional about it, and it's not enough that I want to help, because they're rejecting all help for the time being. Eventually, there will be opportunity for possibly you and I go visit my hometown, Ramallah, and think about what can we do here.
Yeah. Okay, let's dream about the future. Okay, thank you so much, Musab, for taking all this time together with us. I'm so thankful for the relation, and we wish you the blessing of God. Og til dere Israels venner, takk for at dere har vært logget inn og fulgt med oss. Og hvis du har slitt med å følge med på hva som har blitt sagt der på grunn av engelsken, eller dårlig linje, eller hva det måtte være, så planlegger vi å oversette og tekste det som har blitt sagt fra vår venn Musab her. Det kommer om ikke så veldig lenge. Så takk for i dag, god helg, og Gud velsigne deg.